they found out the night before. A woman named Carol, who had known the family through the church auxiliary for 20 years, called to offer condolences and said something about the obituary. Something about hoping it hadn't been too hard to write, given the circumstances. She said circumstances carefully, the way people say words they're not sure they should be saying, and when pressed, she apologized and said she had assumed they knew. They had not known. Helen sat at the kitchen table after the call and did not speak for a long time. Her daughter Meg sat across from her. The house was quiet in the specific way. Houses go quiet when something large has entered them and there isn't yet language for it. After a while, Helen said, "We'll still go. We'll go and we'll bury him and we'll come home." Meg said, "Okay." They went to bed. Meg did not sleep. She didn't know whether her mother did. In the morning, Helen moved through the house with an economy of motion that Meg had never seen in her. No excess, no lingering. She dressed carefully. The dark coat, the good shoes, the single strand of pearls she wore to occasions that required her to be taken seriously. She checked her reflection once and walked away from the mirror without adjustment. Meg thought about her father while watching her mother prepare. He had been a man of compartments. She understood that, now in a way she hadn't when he was alive. His warmth had been genuine, she still believed that, but it had operated in sections. There had always been phone calls taken in other rooms, trips explained in broad strokes, a privacy he framed as self-sufficiency. In hindsight, the edges didn't quite explain themselves. She stopped thinking about him and watched her mother put on her coat. The church was half full when they arrived, which was more than Meg had expected. Her father had been a private man, and she had worried the service would feel thin. It didn't. People had come. The three of them were already seated in the front row. A woman, somewhere in her mid-40s, composed in a way that looked effortful. Two children beside her, a boy and a girl, dressed carefully, sitting still with the particular stillness of children who have been told this is important. The girl had her father's eyes. The boy did too. Meg registered the eyes and wished immediately that she hadn't. Helen stopped at the entrance to the nave. Meg stopped beside her and watched her mother look at the room. Take in the flowers, the casket, the people already seated, the front row and what it contained. The calculation happening behind her mother's face was not visible exactly. It was more like weather, something you sensed without seeing the mechanism. Several seconds passed. Helen reached up and straightened her coat, which did not need straightening. Then she walked to the second row, sat down, folded her hands in her lap, and faced forward. Meg sat beside her. She did not trust herself to speak, and so she didn't. The eulogies were offered by a colleague, a neighbor, a man from the church who had known her father for decades. Meg heard none of them with any clarity. She was watching her mother, the set of her shoulders, the absolute stillness of her posture. The one moment, during the second eulogy, when Helen's hand moved slowly to her collarbone and rested there briefly, fingers light against the pearls, before returning to her lap. That gesture, Meg would carry it for years without knowing exactly why. The pastor, near the end of the service, gestured toward the front row and referred to them as the immediate family. He said it without apparent awareness of what he was detonating. A murmur moved through the left side of the congregation. Quiet, involuntary, the sound of people recalibrating. Helen did not move, did not turn her head. Sat in the second row of her husband's funeral with the stillness of someone who had decided at some point in the last 18 hours exactly how much of herself she was willing to spend on this day. In the parking lot afterward, a relative, well-meaning, constitutionally unable to leave things unsmoothed, began moving toward the woman from the front row with the clear intention of introduction. Helen said quietly, "Not today." The relative stopped. Something in Helen's voice made stopping the obvious choice. Meg drove her mother home. They didn't discuss it. Helen looked out the window at the November trees and Meg kept her eyes on the road and the radio stayed off. At home, Helen asked if there was food. There was. Neighbors had brought things, casseroles and bread and the particular abundance that arrives around death. They ate without ceremony. Weeks later, Meg came by on a Tuesday afternoon and found her mother at the kitchen table, a cup of tea gone cold in front of her, looking at nothing particular in the middle distance. The expression on her face was not grief exactly. It was something more patient than grief, something still working. Meg did not ask what she was thinking. She pulled out the chair beside her and sat down. Outside the window, the yard was bare and still. They stayed like that a while, the two of them in the house where everything had recently changed, in the silence that was not empty, but full of all the things that didn't need to be said, because they were simply, permanently, known.